Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. So we will continue our discussion on economy. So we actually started off with the module balance of payment, and 2 sessions are already done in that module. In the first session we talked about what is balance of payment, what are the different accounts, what is trade account, what is invisible account. Then we have also talked about capital account, okay, current account, capital account, and we have understood what is current account surplus, capital account surplus, what is trade account surplus, invisible account surplus. All these concepts I've done. And then we have also talked about a balance of payment summary of 2015-16, and I've discussed entire details with perfect data. And then I've told you what you mean by reserve change, how forex inflows there, how forex outflows there, how forex is actually added to BOP, and how the outflow is there. All these things we have discussed in detail, and we have also seen BOP equilibrium, BOP surplus, BOP deficit, all these concepts. And after that, in the second video, we have talked about the indicators of balance of payment situation, and we have given emphasis on forex, current account deficit, external debt, and we have discussed certain concepts like debt service ratio, capital inflows, the pattern of capital inflows, and then we have discussed about components of forex reserves, okay. And I've told you the hard currencies, SDR, RTP, reserve trench position with IMF, and gold. All these are the components, and I've given you the percentage wise distribution also of all these three. And then we have talked about the change in forex. What is the reason for change in forex? One is related to BOP, obviously, and then we have also discussed about valuation effect when we talk about change in forex. And after that we have talked about some concepts like sovereign wealth fund and all, okay. And we have also talked about advantages of holding huge forex. So these are the things that we have discussed so far, and I'm covering entire UPSC syllabus of economy here. So we have taken each and every word from the syllabus and we have covered it, okay. So here in this session I'll be talking about exchange rate systems, okay, different exchange rate systems, and what we have followed till 1992 and 1991 till reforms, and then after that what we followed, and everything will be discussed in detail, okay. So let's start with the session. Exchange rate systems. Exchange rate system. The first one is fixed or pegged exchange rate system. So fixed or pegged exchange rate system. See, if you have any doubt on any of my previous videos, you can actually get in touch with me. This is my Instagram ID, this is my Telegram channel also, so you can join the Telegram channel, Zia Safir. You will get all the videos that I've done so far, be it history or economy, and everything is there, and you can get connected to me in this Instagram ID, okay. So what do you mean by fixed exchange rate system? I'll write it down first and then I'll explain. Under this, exchange rate is determined by the central bank, okay. So the exchange rate is actually fixed by the central bank. And if you remember in the planning module, when we talked about LPG, when we talked about Washington Consensus, which we have signed between IMF and World Bank, I have told you there was problem with exchange rate, okay, and we have followed fixed exchange rate, this exchange rate system during that time. So even after this BOP crisis and forex shortage, our exchange was like this. $1 was kept as rupees 18. It was 18 rupee, okay. So this actually created a lot of problem during the time of crisis also. If it would have been a floating system, then rupee would have automatically depreciated, and to some extent some problems would have solved by promotion of exports, and through that you will get some forex and all these ways, okay. But it didn't happen because we followed a fixed exchange rate system, and after that, because of the conditions which was imposed by IMF and World Bank, we are supposed to change the system, and later we changed the system, exchange rate system, but at that time we actually went for devaluation of rupee, okay. So devaluation of rupee, and $1 we kept as rupee 24. For what purpose? It is basically to promote export, okay. So to promote exports, you actually went for devaluation of rupee as per the conditions of Washington Consensus. And you know, when you're devaluing rupee, foreigner will actually get more for $1, so he will obviously try to buy more, so exports will be promoted. And you know, when you're exporting, Indian exporters are actually gaining more, so automatically it will result into promotion of exports, and that will ultimately bring forex to India. So this is one of the thing that we have done during LPG as per Washington consensus. Now here you see, let me write it down. What do you mean by devaluation? Devaluation and depreciation is different. Depreciation we will talk. It is actually happening in a floating exchange rate system. It is a market mechanism based on demand supply. Automatically rupee depreciate or appreciate. But when I talk about devaluation, it is done by the central bank. And revaluation, it is the opposite of devaluation. We will keep like instead of this 18, we may keep it like 15, 12, etc. Okay, so revaluation or devaluation in this fixed system, and depreciation and appreciation, we discuss that when we discuss about the other exchange system, that is floating exchange system. Okay, so here let me write it out, write about this devaluation. Devaluation is the reduction in value of domestic currency in terms of a foreign currency by the central bank. And you know, we have devalued it 3 times. So one was in 1949, then 1966 we are facing acute shortage of food, famine, and even planned holiday was also announced during this time. If you remember, all these things we have discussed. And then in 1991. Okay, so these are 3 times we have done devaluation, and here we have done as per the Washington consensus. Okay, so what about revaluation? Revaluation will be the opposite of devaluation. So revaluation, it is the increase in exchange rate of the domestic currency in terms of other currency. Here we are talking about dollar, by the central bank. Okay, so this is what you mean by devaluation and revaluation, which will happen only in this exchange rate system. And we have devalued 3 times, 1949, 1966, and in 1991. And after that we cannot go for devaluation because we have changed our system, so there will be automatically depreciation and appreciation will happen. Okay, so we have devalued 3 times. Next we will talk about the next exchange rate system, that is floating or flexible exchange rate system. Okay, so let me write it down. What do you mean by this? Under this exchange rates of various currencies are determined on the basis of their demand or supply in the forex market. Okay, so in the forex market you will get the demand of that particular currency and supply of that particular currency, and the demand supply curve will be drawn like I have shown you in case of, you know, how to fix the price of share in a share market. You will take the demand of that particular share and you'll take the supply of that particular share, and you will draw the demand supply curve, and you'll see the point where it meets, and that is the equilibrium, that much quantities will be bought and sold. Okay, so here if you see how this demand supply is working out, so here we are actually talking about interbank forex market when I'm talking about this forex market. Okay, so let's take a demand supply situation here. Okay, now first of all you need to know who create demand. Okay, so here let me take on x-axis quantity of dollar, and here we will write price. Okay, price of what? Price of dollar in terms of rupee. Okay, so price of dollar in terms of rupee. Okay, so that is your y-axis. Now when you talk about demand of dollar, that actually show outflow of dollar. Okay, so demand of dollar, who will create that? importers, right? Okay, so I hope you understood this. When I'm talking about demand of dollar, it is basically to pay outside. You need to pay in terms of forex. Okay, so actually this is going to be outflow of dollar. So importers need to pay the bill, so that dollar is going out. That's why I'm talking about demand is actually indicate outflow of dollar. Who create demand? Importers, mainly importers, not only importers. There are Indian tourists. I don't want to talk about the case where Indian tourists touring in India, so then there is no need of any dollar or anything. Okay, but here I'm talking about Indian tourists who's going abroad, so they are in need of dollar and they demand dollar for spending it outside. So again you can understand that the dollar is going out. So again outflow of dollar. Again Indian investor, I am not talking about Indian investor investing in India, in abroad. Okay, and obviously this is very important, withdrawal of foreign investment. So from the share market or any other investment, when they're withdrawing and when they're going back, they will sell their shares in terms of rupee and they will get dollar back and they will take the dollar out. Okay, so that also shows outflow of dollar. So these are the people who actually create demand of dollar. Now who creates supply? Supply actually indicate inflow of dollar. Okay, so supply indicate inflow of dollar. Why? Because some people who are coming to India, they are in need of rupee, so they will give dollar and they'll get rupee. So that's how supply of dollar. So that is actually coming to India. Similarly, actually exporters mainly. So when you export, you will get dollar and you will get that in terms of rupee, obviously. So that actually shows inflow of dollar. Okay, so that dollar is coming and then you can convert that in terms of rupee. Whatever it is, that dollar will be with the RBI. Okay, so RBI or authorized agencies. So mainly, if here it is importers, here it will be exporters. Okay, so are the main suppliers, and then foreign tourist who is visiting India, they will supply dollar and they get rupee. And the foreign investors, so foreign investors, when they are investing in India, they are coming with dollar. So that also shows supply of dollar or inflow of dollar. And then foreign remittances. So all these are actually etc. So all these here also, all these are actually the supply of dollar. So demand and supply will be created, and based on this, you will be drawing a demand supply curve. Demand supply curve we have discussed already in the chapter demand and supply. Demand curve look downward. Okay, there will be a downward sloping curve. So I'll draw this demand curve, and this is the demand of dollar. So let me mark it like this. Supply curve shows upward sloping, so it will go like this. So this is your supply curve, so supply of dollar. Okay, now so this is the equilibrium point and this is the equilibrium situation. So imagine this is the current situation. Now what happens is, let's suppose the demand is increasing. Now the demand for dollar is increasing, means what will happen with the demand curve? You know, if there is an increase in demand, the demand curve will shift rightward. Don't talk about upward and downward shift, that will only confuse you, because you need to reverse when it comes to supply. But in case of increase, if you can understand, if you can take it as rightward shift, for demand and supply it is the same. If it is decrease, it is leftward shift. For demand and supply, it is actually the same. So it is better to understand in terms of rightward or leftward shift. If it is an increase, whether it is supply or demand, there is a rightward shift. If there is a decrease, whether it is supply or demand, it is a leftward shift. So here I am talking about increase in demand that will result into a rightward shift of demand curve. So let me shift the demand curve to right. So you can see the new demand curve here. So D1, demand for dollar, is actually shifting. So now what is a new equilibrium position? Because supply is not changing. If you want, you can talk about the case where supply is increasing, supply is decreasing, supply remains the same. I am, for simplicity, taking it as supply remains the same. So supply is not increasing, but demand is increasing. What will happen now with the price of dollar? You can see here, let's suppose this was 67 rupee for $1. Now you can see this is going to be the new equilibrium, right? So in this case, you can see the dollar, the price of dollar is actually increasing, maybe to 68, 69, like that. So what you will say here, demand of dollar is increasing. That means now you need to pay more rupee. Or in other words, you can say this lead to appreciation of dollar, or automatically you can say depreciation of rupee. So here what happened? Appreciation of dollar or depreciation of rupee. If demand of dollar would have reduced, okay, then what would have happened? The rupee would have appreciated, or that will not actually happen, or supply of dollar, if it is increased, then also rupee would have appreciated. Okay, so we can talk about that case. That is the reason why in case of more demand of dollar, RBI will pump forex so that supply will increase, so that rupee will appreciate and dollar will depreciate. That is one of the certain mechanisms that RBI can do, and that is why our system is known as managed float, not purely float. Okay, we'll come to that. So here we are talking about appreciation and depreciation, and we are not talking about devaluation or revaluation. So devaluation and revaluation is the concept that we have discussed in the fixed rate system, fixed or pegged exchange rate system. Here we are not talking about devaluation or revaluation. We are talking about depreciation and appreciation, which actually happens in the market based on demand supply. So you will talk about the demand of dollar. Who create demand, you understood. Who create supply, you understood. Take the demand curve, take the supply curve, see the equation, see the equilibrium position, and if the demand is changing, based on that, if supply is not changing accordingly, there will be a depreciation of rupee or appreciation of dollar. So this is how the market mechanism work. So I hope this is clear for all of you. So now we'll write what is depreciation or appreciation. So depreciation is actually reduction in exchange rate of a currency due to change in its demand and supply in the forex market. Okay, so this is what you mean by depreciation, and same as the case of appreciation. So there will be, instead of reduction, increase. Okay, so that's about depreciation and appreciation. So what about impact of depreciation? Impact of depreciation and devaluation will be actually same. Impact of appreciation and revaluation will also be same, just that the name is different. One in case of fixed system, the other is in case of floating system. The concept is same, the advantages, disadvantages, or actually the impact is same in both cases. Revaluation or appreciation, depreciation and devaluation, impact is actually the same. So here, if you talk about the advantages of depreciation, see, even if it is happening, there will be some advantages, and that is the reason why China always devalue their currency, because of certain advantages. We'll come to that later. So, and obviously there are some disadvantages also. So let me write down the advantages first. Advantages. So first one, it promote exports. Okay, I've told you export becomes competitive, and you can the foreigners will buy more. Secondly, you will get more money. Okay, when you are getting $1, when rupee depreciating, earlier you are getting 67 rupee for $1, now you are getting 68 rupees, so you will be automatically trying to export. So here also there is a motivation to export, and they will buy more also. Okay, so it promotes exports as exported commodities become cheaper in terms of foreign currency. Okay, so earlier if you are spending 1 rupee, you are getting 67 rupee worth item by a foreigner. Now you spend that $1, you'll be getting around 68 rupee worth item. Okay, similarly tourist will also come more. Earlier you were getting 67 rupee for $1, so maybe 670 rupee in case of $10. Now you are getting 680 rupee for the same $10. So what you can do, you can spend that 10 rupee extra. Maybe you can stay in a better hotel, or maybe you can have some better food. So more foreign tourists will also come. So like export increase, for tourists also will increase, because these things are getting cheaper now, okay, for the foreigners. Secondly, it discourages imports. So discourages imports as imported commodities, what will happen? It will become more dearer, because now earlier you were paying $1, and for that, actually you need to spend 67 rupee to get a dollar. Now for paying that $1 you need to pay 68 rupee. So effectively the same product when you're importing, despite the fact that it is costing $1, earlier in terms of Indian currency you need to pay 67, now you need to pay 68, so it becomes dearer. So you may not import often. Okay, so imported commodities becomes dearer in terms of domestic currency. So these are very important from prelims point of view. This is very important. Those exports are promoted and discourages import. Those 2 points are very, very important. So I hope you understood the reason. Okay, so these are very, very, very high or very important impact of, depreciation. Okay, or the advantages. So overall, what will happen when you are promoting export, you are encouraging export and discouraging imports, so the current account deficit will automatically reduce, okay, which is desirable. So the trade deficit and current account deficit, if you remember, I have discussed this in balance of payment in detail, what is trade deficit and what is current account deficit and everything we have discussed. This will decrease. Okay, it will also promote what? Foreign remittances and foreign tourism, because why foreign remittances? Foreign tourism, just now I have told you, you are spending $1, earlier you are getting 67, now you are getting 68, so you can spend some luxury hotels or something like that, so that's why, and you can spend some good foods, etc. So foreign tourists will come. Secondly, foreign remittances, when you are sending money to India, earlier you are getting 67 for $1, now you are getting more, so you will send more money. Okay, that will actually help in increase in forex. So all these are very, very important from prelims point of view. Again and again I'm stressing you will get questions, concepts related question only from my notes. You don't want to read anything apart from these notes. Okay, so that's the way it is covered. All the topics, all the areas are actually covered. So the current values, the data you need to update from economic survey. Apart from that, concept wise, no need of anything. So it promotes foreign remittances, inward foreign remittances, and foreign tourism. Just writing like this only, foreign tourism. Okay, so automatically what will happen? It tends to increase the forex reserve and it will strengthen BOP situation. So forex increase and that lead to strengthen what? BOP. So this are the advantages of this depreciation of rupee. What are the disadvantages? Let me write the disadvantages. So disadvantages, actually I have told you there will be more exports. So domestically the goods will be less, one thing. So you may not be able to meet the demand supply. So there will be a mismatch in demand supply, the domestic demand and domestic supply. Secondly, when you are exporting more forex is coming. When more forex is coming, equal amount of money is printed and circulated in the market. So more money will be circulated in the market. So money supply will increase. So automatically demand will increase. When money supply increase, demand will increase. Okay, so that will lead to inflation. So all these things are connected. So that will lead to inflation. So let me write it down. It is inflationary as it increase forex reserve. Just writing like this only, forex. This will increase money supply and that will increase the aggregate demand. So when the aggregate demand increases, inflation will increase. If the demand cannot meet with supply, if there is a mismatch in demand and supply, there will be inflation, the demand pull inflation. So that is the first disadvantage. Second one, so here we talked about demand pull inflation. It also lead to cost push inflation, because when you're imported commodities will become dearer. So those items, there will be a higher cost of production. So that lead to cost push inflation. Okay, so it lead to also cost push inflation as imported commodities become dearer. Okay, which will actually affect the economic growth. So when the cost of production is increasing means it's definitely going to affect the growth. Okay, demand pull inflation is somewhat desirable, but it will actually increase the growth, but cost push inflation is not desirable because it actually tend to reduce national income. So if you see here, what is demand pull inflation? So here you can see this is the demand, this is the supply. So what is actually happening? So this was the previous situation. Now more demand, so demand curve is shifting rightward. So this is demand, this is supply, this is the new demand. So demand curve is shifting rightward. So now this is the case. So this was price 1, now price 2. So there is an increase in price, and this side it is national income. So national income increased. When the price is increased, national income is increased. This is what demand pull inflation. On the other side, if you take the cost push inflation, so I'm drawing it here again, national income, price here. Cost push inflation, let's take this normal scenario like this. This is the equilibrium position. Cost push means supply will be less. Okay, so supply will be less means supply curve shift leftward. Okay, leftward. So I'm shifting this up. This is the supply curve, this is the demand curve, this is the new supply. So you can see here the price is actually increased from P1 to P2, but you see here national income reduced. So that is the reason why I've told you this is demand pull inflation and this is cost push inflation. So both are inflationary, both are actually difficult, but somewhat demand pull inflation is desirable because it promotes growth, it promotes employment opportunity. So there are a lot of advantages is there when there is a demand pull inflation. It actually shows a good sign there is a demand in the market. Why? Because money supply is there. Why? Because jobs are there. Why? Because employment is there, because growth is there. But see, this is actually a very dangerous thing. Okay, because national income is reducing, unemployment will be there, jobless people will be there, money won't be there. So all these are going to affect a lot of, create a lot of problems. Okay, so this is going to be a problem. Third one, it obviously increased the burden of external debt. We have already discussed. Increase burden of external debt in terms of domestic currency. Then it deteriorates terms of trade. It deteriorates term of trade. What do you mean by terms of trade? It refers to purchasing power of exports of a country in terms of quantity of imported commodities. So I've already discussed this, so there is no point in getting into the details of it. It also leads to drain of resources. Okay, so it also leads to drain of resources. So terms of trade, if you remember, we have actually discussed this. I've given you the equation also. What is that? Terms of trade, you can refer to the previous video. The price index number of exports, and we have marked it as PX. X is export, okay, P is the price, and divided by price index number of imports, we marked it as PM. M was the import. So if you talk about the impact, when you talk about the short-term impact, okay, so short-term it may be desirable because you can promote export. Short-term may be desirable to overcome a specific problem, but long-term definitely not desirable because this is not a permanent solution. China contributing 10% of world trade or world export, 10% of world exports. So that's actually a huge amount. Because China is following this policy. China is actually not following this to increase their exports. They are already having too much export, but to maintain that export, they are supposed to follow that. Okay, so to check that decline, China is doing this. Okay, so 2008 crisis, so to promote export and to maintain export, For these two, they are doing this. Okay, so their system is like fixed system. So like their system is actually related to revaluation and devaluation. It is not market mechanism. Okay, now have you heard of this beggar thy neighbor policy? This thing, beggar thy neighbor policy. See, this policy is all about one country is taking advantage of another country. So taking advantage of advantage at the cost of another country. So the other country will actually suffer. For example, China is exporting too much to US. What is actually happening? So the Chinese products are cheap and US products is not actually competitive with the Chinese products. So domestic production will be affected. So what will happen? US will come up with protectionist policy. So when they come up with protectionist policy, you cannot only impose that on China, you will impose that on every other country. So India is also actually affected. So India's export to US is very less because of these protectionist policies. So I can even say, or you can say that India's export to US is low because of China, because China is exporting and China is dumping the products. So they went for protectionist policy and that prevented export from India also. So this is what you mean by beggar thy neighbor policy. Just let me write it down. A country taking advantage at the cost of other countries. See, when China is exporting to US this much, what is actually happening? The trade deficit of US is actually increasing, and more than that, domestic companies are forced to shut down, and that lead to a lot of problems. So protectionist measures. So if China won't go for devaluation, US might not have adopted this protectionist measures. So India's export would also have increased, maybe. Okay, so that's it. We will move to the next one, wider band exchange rate system. Okay, so third one, wider band exchange rate system. Okay, so let me write down the definition first and then I'll explain this. Under this, central bank fixes an exchange rate band. So there will be lower and upper limit for this band for the domestic currency within which its exchange rate is permitted to fluctuate. So it is not like anywhere you can fluctuate. There is an upper limit and lower limit. So between that, it's like this only. So if you go for time in the x-axis and exchange rate here, so there will be an upper limit and there will be a lower limit. So the exchange rates will fluctuate like this. So in between they can go in any direction like this. Okay, so this is what you mean by wider band exchange rate system. Next is Growling peg exchange rate system. So fourth one, Growling peg exchange rate system. Okay, so under this, central bank fixes an exchange rate band for the domestic currency which is periodically revised. Okay, see, it is similar to the previous one that we have discussed, wider band exchange rate system only. So there they are fixing a band which is having upper and lower limit. Here also they are fixing the band with upper and lower limit, but what actually happens is it will be revised periodically. So it is not like this is fixed here. You can see this is fixed, but here what is actually going to happen is, let's take this one. So here it is a time and here it is exchange rate. So it will be like this. So it will be like this for some time, then it will revise like this. Now it may fluctuate between that, or then after that it may revise like this, and then it may come back like this. Okay, so it will fluctuate like this. In between they will fluctuate like this, like this, like this. So central bank fixes the band which is having upper limit and lower limit, but that band will be periodically revised. That may increase, that may decrease. So it all depends on the central bank. So who's following this? China is actually following this. So they fix this upper and lower limit. Not only they are fixing, they periodically revise it. So that is why it is a kind of, although you can see they are allowed to fluctuate between some distance, but since they can keep on revising that as per their wish, we can also consider this as a kind of fixed system, and that's why we are talking about devaluation and revaluation in case of China. So China is following this system. So it's actually a variant of fixed exchange rate system, even though you are allowed to fluctuate like this, but that fluctuation is actually fixed and it is periodically revised. So I would say it's a variant of fixed system, and China is following this system. So which system China is following? Crawling peg exchange rate system. Don't completely say fixed exchange rate system. Crawling peg exchange rate system. The bands are fixed, you're allowed to fluctuate, but they will keep on changing that band as per their policy decisions. And that's why we are talking about devaluation and revaluation. Next one is what we are following, India is following, managed float exchange rate system. So our policy is not about completely floating, just like China is not about completely fixed. It was crawling peg. So like that, India is not totally floating, it is managed float. Okay, so the fifth one, managed float exchange rate system. I'll write it down. Under this, exchange rate of the domestic currency is determined on the basis of its demand and supply, subject to the central bank's intervention in the forex market. See, what is the difference from floating system here? This much is same, determined on the basis of demand and supply. From here, it is subject to central bank's intervention. So RBI will interfere. That means it's not completely floating. RBI will interfere in case if there is a problem. Okay. So it is again based on demand supply. So who create demand, who create supply, all those things we have actually discussed. So it is similar to this only. So where we discussed that, we have discussed it somewhere here. Yeah, here. So say not here. Here, this one. So exactly the same thing. Demand will be there, supply will be there. So this is how it is going on. But now here, what will happen? RBI will interfere. Okay. So it's like this. This is quantity of dollar. So on the y-axis, price of dollar in terms of rupee. Okay. So price of dollar in terms of rupee. So demand curve will be there, supply curve will be there. So this is demand for dollar, this is supply of dollar, upward slope. So this is actually the equilibrium position. So here I'm not saying central bank can fix. If it is the case, that is fixed rate. So here central bank can interfere. That is why it is managed float. It is floating. So slightly the central bank can influence, but that influence is not much possible. Otherwise rupee would not have depreciated from 45 to 67. What the RBI can do maximum is, what I have told you is when the demand is increasing, the curve will shift rightward. So the price is actually increasing. Okay. So from 67 to 68, it is increased. Now what RBI can actually do is, when this is increasing, the demand is increasing, RBI, whatever forex is available with RBI can supply that forex. So the same percentage of supply increases there like this. What would have happened? So now you see what is the new point of equilibrium? This is the new point of equilibrium. So you can see price remains 67 itself. So 10% extra demand is there. based on that 10% extra supply is given by RBI, then there won't be any depreciation of rupee. So that is one of the way in which you can actually solve the depreciation of rupee, but it is very limited role, and if that could have been done, we won't face this much problem, and we need to have huge forex for doing all these things. So there is always a limitation for central bank's intervention. Now we are following this system from when 1993 onwards till 1991 we were fixed. Okay, now 93 onwards we are following managed float. This is also called as dirty float. Why? Because not purely float, dirty float, because central bank can interfere. If you have huge forex with you, you can just pump that and you can manipulate the supply. So central bank can manipulate the supply. Okay, so that is why it is known as dirty float. So I hope this is clear for all of you. What all things we have discussed is done completely. If you have any doubt, you can get in touch with me. This is the Instagram ID. This is a Telegram channel. You can join the Telegram channel for all the videos. If you need any personal mentorship or sociology optional classes or anything, you can get in touch with me here in this Instagram. So see you guys.